to the Successful Survivors podcast. We are successful survivors of childhood trauma. We're just a little bit twisted. We're glad that you're here. This is your tribe. You're safe with us. This is a free-flowing discussion. And today we're going to talk about victim mentality. You know, that chip on the shoulder. Sometimes it's a boulder on the shoulder. We can't live successful lives like that. So we're going to talk about that, how to deal with that. And so, Chris, take it away. No?
This is so awesome that it's victim mentality and what just happened. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Chris Jablewski, and I love the Successful Survivor podcast. I just gave the greatest intro in the history of podcasting. Honestly, you would have cried. It was so fantastic. And then the computer just crashed. And now I get to be a victim and get to visibly show you victim mentality. Because this has been the last 2 years of my life. Every time something goes well, something goes horribly wrong. I'm not here all the time on the Successful Survivors podcast. I kind of bounce in as my mania allows. I love these ladies. I think they're fantastic. I leave, and they all turned into Josephine Rogans, and it's been fantastic to watch. They're all very professional now. When we started, it was a hodgepodge of craziness. And now, as you see on the screens, I'm the only one without a white background because I am now the unprofessional one. More victim mentality. So a little bit about my background. I have known most of these people for upwards of 10 years because I run America's premier foster care magazine, Foster Focus, and have done so for the last decade. And I have, in that time, garnered a reputation as someone who doesn't let anything bother them, someone who takes bad situations and turns them into something prosperous and profitable and productive. And a year and change, I ended up getting a divorce. My wonderful wife of almost 20 years decided to go another route with the second half of her life. And unexpectedly, and I have since then not been myself. And there's been a dip in production of my work and my health and my brain. The mania that I had before my marriage has reemerged and has made life very trying. There has been some drinking, although I managed to keep that at bay. And this is one of the things that people with a victim mentality will turn to as a crutch, and we'll discuss that. We'll discuss many things today, all the different aspects of victim mentality and how it presents itself. For me, it has presented itself as a paralyzing agent. I am unable to do my work. I am unable to interact with people. Some of you may know that I'm a paid stand-up comedian. It's my job to make other people feel good. And with this feeling like the world's coming down on me nonsense, I'm oftentimes unable to do that job. And so it's something that affects a lot of us in the survivors of trauma and former foster kids, adoptees. It affects us in different ways. It's definitely something that presents itself when we get in groups. You'll remember I call it the Trauma Olympics, where we try to one-up how bad each other's lives are. So we're going to delve into that. We're going to talk about those things. We're also going to talk about how you get out of it, because heck, I need to know. I'm looking for some answers. I've come up out of it a couple times since it's happened, and then it'll pull you back down. It's difficult to have some bad things happen to you and not feel woe is me, that type of feeling. So, I mean, what I want to do first here is as it should be, I want firsthand accounts. Let's give an example or two of how you felt like the victim, why you maybe even still right now feel like the victim, and then we'll move on to the next step, identifying the symptoms and how we can attack that. So I'm gonna let you guys have the floor, and it's good to be back. It's nice to see everybody.
We're so glad you're here.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead, Rhonda?
Okay, well, I just lived consistently in victim mentality for probably the first 30 or 35 years of my life. And I thought everybody was out to get me. Everybody had a better life than me. Everybody had parents. Everybody else had siblings. Everybody had, a house with food and heat in the winter and air conditioning. Well, I didn't even know air conditioning existed at first. But anyway, I just always thought that I was alone in this. And the way I got out of it, and I'm not sure this is the healthiest thing. Our mental health professional among us, feel free to correct me or say, okay, well, listen to Rhonda, but don't do what she says. So my way that I dealt with it is I got angry. And then I channeled that anger. And I thought, oh, everybody has all this good stuff and I don't. Oh, hell no. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get some of that. And so I just decided that I was going to be the hardest worker in the history of employment for every employer that I worked for. And then I started my own business, and every time a competitor would take an account from me or whatever, it would just make me double down, and I would just be that much crazier about winning, and I just had to win. And then when I started winning, I actually started kind of getting rid of that, like seeing the light about how unhealthy the whole victim mentality was. And I'm completely different now. I'm not angry anymore. And I don't have a victim mentality anymore. I'm not sure my way would work for everybody, obviously, but channeling my anger about all the things I didn't get in my childhood, all the things I thought that everybody else in the world had, and I was the only one who had a hard life. Channeling it instead of stuffing it down or using drugs or drink. I never used any of that. I never did any of that because I didn't want to dull my senses. I wanted to be as sharp as possible. I wanted to be as smart as possible. And I didn't want any substance to kill any brain cells because I can't afford to lose even one. So that worked for me. So what about you, Lee?
Well, I'm just sitting here kind of thinking I'm a victim of technology because all that shows is my head. I feel like I should be a fat sports picture thing or something. I don't even remember what those are called.
I kind of feel, I'm
Heads,
interrupting you on this, but I feel like you are the visual image of what Rhonda was expressing, where we feel kind of floaty and unsure and uncertain. Yeah, like I kind of appreciated that, really.
So I think one of the things that I want to encourage people about is that victim mentality isn't something that you get better from, right? It's not something that's you wake up one day and you're fixed. Or if you just do these magical things, then you won't face that mentality again. You can be the most successful, most wealthy person on the planet and have a victim mentality. And I think what sets us apart sometimes is that the things that somebody who hasn't experienced the level of trauma of being separated from their family, the things that will trigger that victim mentality are things that they would never see. And so then, because we're so used to comparing ourselves to each other, I think what happens is we become even more deep in that mentality of, so there is something wrong with me. I don't measure up to my peers or whatever that may be, which then just starts that whole cycle. And it's really hard to break free from that if you don't have a proper support system around you. So I just wanted to start with that a little bit because there may be people who watch this podcast who, much like Chris, much like myself, and I'm guessing probably the rest of the panel, you have had many times that you have had to go back and break out of that victim mentality. It isn't just a one-time, done and fixed it. It is being aware of what causes you to go into that mindset. I think the first time that it became really clear to me, and I can pinpoint when it became clear to me, although was not, I didn't know what to do with it. In the victim mentality world, I remember I was sitting in church and the pastor was just going on and on about joy and happiness, and I was in the midst of the deepest, darkest depression I had ever experienced, and tears were just streaming down my face. And I remember turning and looking at my husband and saying, "When's it going to be my turn? When do I get to experience this joy that seems to be so natural, and that he's preaching about, and that I believe, I believe that God is who he says he is, and that he wants us to have joy. And if that's the case, why can't I experience it? When's it going to be my turn? When do I get to smile?" Because it had been so long since I had experienced any kind of joy. And now I wasn't able to break free from that, and I didn't see it for what it is now. At the time, it just felt like the knife being stuck in a little deeper. And so it was actually a very selfish, self-centered aspiration that I personally had to figure out, how do I move past this? Because my very nature is not that way. I generally tend to put others first, or think about helping others solve problems. And I'm generally, by nature, not a victim. I prefer to use the things that maybe haven't been so much fun as a learning experience to not go back down that path. So I know we're going to touch on, Chris, in a little bit, how do we break out of those things? What are the things that we do individually that help support that? But I just really, this could be a very heavy topic for somebody who's listening. And I just really want to encourage you that you're not alone in this journey. You know, I have been honored to walk alongside this panel and be a person who's a phone call or a text away. And at the same time, they have done the same for me. So I know that if you are struggling right now and you're angry, that we as a group want to be a group that comes around you and supports you and helps you find the tools and in your area, and helps you, connect you to a support system that's going to be able to help you walk through some really difficult, hard times. But you don't have to stay there. That's the beauty of it all. You don't have to stay there.
I absolutely love what you were saying there, of kind of understanding what victim mentality is. And I think when Chris started, it's important to be aware of the connotation, the negative connotation of the word victim mentality. Of course, it's not a positive place to be. It's not where we want to be, but having victim mentality, like you said, seasonally or as life happens, does not mean that we are a bad person. You might say, "Hey, I have victim mentality. That is me right now." That is not equal to being a bad person. It just means that there's something that needs to be worked on or improved so you can have the quality of life that you deserve. There's a lot of things that go into victim mentality, tend to be people who are struggling with negative thinking. They have self-defeating emotions like shame, guilt, anger. Anger is not bad, Rhonda, when you said that, when you use it in a healthy way. But if you're using it in a negative way, kind of the signs that I think of that might say, when you're hearing these different stories, am I struggling with victim mentality, is when we think in black and white a lot. Like, I can't ever get over this. I'm unable to make this happen. I'm never going to be better. I'm always going to be hurting. Everyone hates me. And I know as a child, I felt like that a lot because I had a very low self-esteem. I would be told I was worthless. I was be told I was a burden. I had a lot of emotional abuse, which personally, I feel like everybody probably had that and maybe not aware of it or don't feel like they can validate that. But that was the specific type of abuse that was used the most with me. And I have to be very, very careful of when I think something, or if I have a feeling that I was stupid or made a bad choice, that remember my feelings might be true to how I'm feeling, but it doesn't dictate how I act. It doesn't mean that's really who I am or that I have to act that way. So I just think that's important on what you were saying.
Don, any experiences?
I was just going to add to what they were kind of saying too. So this is just fresh today, y'all. I had an opportunity to, the relationship is better, is stronger, and we didn't run from each other, and we didn't, you know, shy away from having a hard conversation, right? So I learned that I think that I am less than everybody. I don't think that I'm equal with anybody, and I think that's also a victim mentality. So I was like, wow, okay, well, obviously I have no insight on how to get out of that just yet, but I think just acknowledging and I'm like, okay, I have to try to now be aware. Self-awareness, I think for me is huge in all of this is I have to be aware of what I'm thinking about, the thinking you were talking about, Amber. That is me. I overthink everything. Someone says something, even if it wasn't to me and I heard it, I'm like, oh man, that's me. That's something's wrong with me. Always, I'm always going back to that. So today was new. So I'm going to work on when I'm talking to somebody and then reflecting on how I'm talking to them and how I'm seeing them. If they're in leadership, then they're in leadership. That doesn't mean they're less than I, or I'm less than they are. It just means they have a little bit of authority or more knowledge or whatever in a certain area or something, right? Like real estate, I would not know anything. I wouldn't know how to do anything. So if I was to come work for you, you would be in leadership. You would have authority and information that I did not have, and you have to share that all with me. And that's coming to work for you because I can't be as amazing as you are. So anyway, so something else that I wanted to add. I mean, I can't be amazing with you like you are, but not in that realm. I have a different realm, right? I saw your face. I heard it when I said it.
It's very easy. My face. A lot of things happening in my face.
No, I saw Amber say I was like, oh, yep, I heard that. I heard what I just said. I was also going to say when I was just really struggling with relationships, really, really hardcore. I had an awful falling out with somebody. And of course, I'm like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Of course, there's always a part that we take in relationships that we can always be better at. Ron has said before, better version of ourselves, right? But something that God laid on my heart was, I took the Google definition and I kind of tweaked it a little bit and said, my definition of victim mentality is a thinking trait a person carries from childhood to adulthood, even when they are no longer in the environment of abuse or control. Basically, no real reason to think, act, or be in a victim state. And I feel like I have done that my whole life. I've been, sexually and physically abused, but the mental and the emotional abuse that I went through was longer and it has stayed with me. I'm like, if you were to talk to me, how I feel about myself, how I think about myself, how I perceive others, is way off. I'm learning that, and God has given me the word perspective for this year, which He's already starting today, which is interesting. So I'm thankful for that, but I'm a little bit nervous. But I think that for me, that mental and emotional stuff was so difficult for me to get away from, because it's always there. It's ingrained in me. And so I've got to dig myself out, and I'm learning that I need to reflect. And gosh, I'll save that because we're going to talk about how to get out of it. But just self-awareness and reflecting, but I'll talk later. So.
That's great. Hey, Diana, do you want to wrap up this identifying and experience part of
Yes. So I first want to say, my experience was from really started at 5 years old, right? So it's sexual, mental, emotional abuse. And I tried to self-medicate at 12 years old. And I basically continued that. So that was my numbing factor. That was how I was coping with everything. I would find wins in certain situations that I got out of or may have worded the crime, if you will, for a minute or two. So I'd find little wins along the way. And at 15 years old, when I got my first job at $3.40 an hour, I really thought I had made it big. I'm like, score, I can move out. I am going to be that person who takes care of herself. So my goal at that point was really to take everything, regardless, throw it in the box. In the head, I have several boxes at the back of my head that it lived in. And I would just leave it there so I could take care of myself and move forward. I'm like, okay, listen, I'm done with that. Turn the page. Let's go. I can't get anywhere if I'm sitting in a corner. Can't move forward. Can't walk down the street. Can't get in the car. Can't move. Can't make money if I'm sitting in a corner. So for me, that's how I dealt with it all the way until 21 when I meet my son's father at the time, and I had Ryan.
Okay, mom was my only goal in life. Like as a kid, it was, I'm going to change. I'm not going to do any of these things that are being done to me. I want to change a cycle. I want a child to come into this world and I want to help them. And then I want to help everybody. So what's really funny about how victim mentality, how I was looking at it was all of these things did happen. But if I use that as an excuse, like they always say this, you can make excuses or you can make money, but you cannot do both. I mean, it's kind of like that concept, and that's kind of used a lot in sales. I'm in sales, obviously, realtor. But what I was learning, and I looked this up, and I was telling Amber, I found this. It's called post-traumatic growth, and here's what it refers to. I'm reading notes over here on the side, by the way. So it refers to positive psychological changes experienced as a result of struggle with highly challenging life circumstances. So you go through the trauma, you go through all of that hard stuff. And it basically, these changes often include improved relationships, new perspectives in life, greater appreciation for life, increased personal strength, etc. And here are 5, because five's the number for me. I always do 5 tips or growth benefits. So it says post-traumatic growth can lead to several benefits. Here's 5. Enhanced personal strength. Survivors often feel stronger after trauma, realizing that they have overcome a significant challenge. That is finding the win, like I always say to do, right? So this can lead to increased self-confidence and resilience. Number 2, improved relationships. People may experience a heightened sense of connection with others who faced similar challenges. They might also feel compassion, empathy, and leading to deeper, more meaningful relationships. So you might pick your person, right? You might have that one person. We have a panel of people that are amazing here, and I can go to any one of you guys. You guys are my people, right? We have that now. We have that compassion and empathy. I can go to all of you guys. Number 3, a greater appreciation for just life in general. So trauma survivors often report a renewed appreciation for each day, a sense of gratitude for life, even if it's just the smallest moments or wins, right? Number 4, new perspectives on life. Individuals may change their priorities. So you make your list, your goals or philosophies of life following the trauma. So now what you want to do that you want to do maybe prior to the trauma or going through the middle of trauma, you had all these other goals, but now after and surviving it and kind of going, I got out of bed today. Huge win. Let's write down a goal. Let's write down a gratitude, something to be grateful for. So you write down different philosophy or priorities and goals and philosophies following that trauma is often place more value on personal fulfillment, less on material success. So it's less on getting that brand new red car, right? And the 5th one, spiritual development. Now, not everybody is a very faithful person. Maybe not everybody believes in God, but people believe in at least a higher power or whatever that may be to them. So some people experience significant spiritual growth, which can lead to a stronger sense of faith, deepening personal beliefs, and a newfound sense of spirituality and connectedness to God or universe, whatever it is. Those are my 5 examples. That to me just hit so hard because for me, I didn't know there was post-traumatic growth. Although I lived it. I'm living it. I feel it. I feel like I'm doing the things I'm trying to be. Even when I, trip and fall and I'm stressed out or have anxiety, I feel like I'm living the things. And I will close with this. This is a realtor example. So picture you have an apartment building and you have a bunch of tenants that are not paying the bills, they're partying all the time, they're causing a ruckus, right? Now, picture your mind as a bunch of rooms, and the tenants that are in those rooms are fear, worry, doubt. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not going to make it. I'm trash. I'll always be trash, right? Those are the tenants in those rooms, and you are letting them rent space. They need to be evicted. It's time to evict those tenants from your brain. So instead, because they don't serve you anymore. So instead, invite the tenants that are good for you: faith, hope, peace, victory, success, growth. So allowing those intruders into your rooms are not only not qualified to be there, they are the ones who are going to cause your mind to manifest. It's a big word Gen Z loves to use, right? It'll manifest everything in your mind to come to fruition. You can change that pattern with gratitude and positivity and challenge your inner John Wick, man. challenge that inner John Wick and just fight for yourself. And that's pretty much all I want to say. And don't let them take over, evict all the bad things.
I think
Chris, I
Amber
got a
might want to
question.
say something.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So first of all, Chris, she said she's got a real example from a realtor. I was like, that's really exciting. I mean, just the words of real could reel a whole lot of conversations going. And I just could envision you, Chris, coming up with tons of jokes for that. So I can't wait for that. So secondly, because humor, when it's healthy, is a great thing for these. And as we transition, I just wanted to acknowledge how everybody, like my next question is, we've all talked about our victimization or being in the victim mentality is how to get to where she was just talking about. But one thing I heard everybody say, you started out this way, Chris, is we all took that step of acknowledging, recognizing our trauma. Maybe we didn't sit and spin in it, maybe we didn't stay there forever, but there is a very important, crucial step of acknowledging it and continuing with that. So what I heard here is I talked about my struggle with the emotional. You talked about even a current one of divorce that goes with a lot of past things. There was somebody talked about grieving. Rhonda talked about anger. Dawn talked about self-reflection. Lee talked about depression. Diana, you were talking about, gosh, I can't remember the word you'd said, but
Post-traumatic growth. Which one?
Yeah, well, the post-traumatic growth. So everybody acknowledged that they had a struggle with the victim mentality. So to me, that's kind of one of the bridge points between how do I move from victim mentality to this survivor. Okay, so Chris, as you lead to this, I just wanted to mention everybody did bring that to the table.
Well, before we move on, we're all different kind of folks. We're in this position because we are different kind of folks. But there are people out there who are playing the victim but don't know that they're playing the victim. And I think you should be the one to speak on this because you have the license and the letters behind your name. How do you, okay, but how do you help? This is interesting. How do you either help someone come to the realization that they are playing the victim, or how do you prevent yourself from straight up telling someone, hey, you're playing the victim? There's got to be a gentle way to say it, because I mean, I'm no licensed anything, but I imagine that if you just call someone out on it, that isn't productive.
Depends on your relationship with the person. The most important thing is to build a relationship. And here's the reason why. Research says when it comes to victim mentality, the primary reason that we as survivors and also people have victim mentality at some point in our life is it typically comes from a betrayal of trust. So any victim mentality that we have, that any of us talked about, come back and say, was that affected by trust of somebody that I should have trusted? So if you have a relationship or trust, even professional trust or personal trust with this person who's stuck in victim mentality, that's what's important. Don't encourage their negative behaviors, but just be there while they're there. And as you build that relationship, there will come a point where either you can help them have a realization or you can point it out to them. Their desire to change that's really up to them. They have to build that confidence and worth in themselves. And there is a period of grieving or loss or frustrations that people have to go through. But the most important thing when you see somebody in a victim mentality, in my opinion, is build a relationship with them. Help them have worth so that they can see where they're at.
Okay. Don, you got something you want to pop in there?
I wanted to pop in real quick and say, also, victim mentality isn't just what's been done to you, but also what you've done to yourself or what you haven't done. I just wanted to bring that up too.
No, that's a great point. This might have to be a two-parter because this is a little bit more complex a subject than maybe we gave it credit for. I want to reiterate that Amber said that we all identified that there was a situation, that we all saw it coming. And again, we are different kind of folks. Diana, Rhonda, and Lee specifically are pull up your bootstraps and get to work type of cats. Where I think Amber and Dawn are more, let's analyze this situation, let's see how I can grow from it. And I might be the oddball and black sheep of the situation, where I'm just, let's get me a pile of cigarettes and maybe a bottle of something, and let's just hope it goes away, and then tomorrow maybe it'll be all right. Hey, Rhonda, I know. Go ahead. I know. Big sister, go ahead and tell me why that is wrong. And I already know why, but go ahead. Hit me.
Oh, you know what? I don't want to tell you it's wrong, Chris, but I want to kind of touch on two things that were said. Diana, when you talked about post-traumatic stress growth, I think that's so incredibly important. And I had the honor a number of years ago of interviewing Dr. Lawrence Calhoun, who spent a lifetime studying post-traumatic stress growth. And it's really interesting to me that somebody somewhere knows that's a thing. I always felt like it was a thing, but I didn't read about it. I didn't hear about it. And when I started, doing child advocacy, I had an experience that really, before I cleaned up my mouth, I would have said really effed me up. I just don't even know how else to say this. So I was asked to come speak by, it was a psychiatric association. I don't even know if they're still around, but it was like something about children's psychiatric. And I was so excited. And I went to this fancy resort and I got up and spoke to this group. And the group was psychiatrists, not psychologists, psychiatrists. And they were all very attentive. They were like wrapped, into what I was saying, and they're making notes. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just really have these people. And it was amazing to me that they asked me to come and speak because I don't have any initials after my name that anybody would care about. My initials have to do with financial estate planning. So I thought it was kind of like maybe they didn't know when they asked me to come and speak who I really was or whatever. And I got done and they asked me to stay and do like a Q&A, and they started asking me questions. And I realized that they looked at me like a performing monkey.
I was going to say like a case study.
Yep. Well, so some people thought, well, the abuse must not have been that bad because look at her. I mean, she's highly performing. I mean, like they were so like they wanted to give me credit that I could dress myself and I could tie my own shoes and I could go to the potty by myself. I mean, I was completely freaked out when I realized why they wanted me there. And someone there, I mean, when I left, I walked off the stage, I left and I had a smile on my face. I had, that thing that we all know how to do, like what's inside is completely different from what's outside. We all know how to do that because that's part of our survival skills. And so I had that on and I went to my room. I almost ran. I tried not to run. And I started sobbing when I got to the room. And then sobbing turned into anger. And I thought, well, I don't want to really act on the anger because I don't want to go to jail because that just proves the point that I'm, so broken and wounded from the abuse that I have to do something bad, ultimately. And so someone explained to me, and I have to give a nod to our social worker. It was a social worker, a person with the heart of a social worker who took me aside later in the day, who had been in the room and said, I want to explain something to you. In child welfare in the 1950s and 60s, the prevailing thought was what they called a medical model. And basically the thought was anyone who's been really severely abused as a child is broken. And their brokenness will show up somewhere. They'll be an alcoholic or they'll be a thief. They'll betray you. They'll commit crimes. Like there's something. And I said, I'm like in response, I'm like, do you think that I'm an axe murderer? Just like at some point in time, I'm going to just snap like I'm good, but don't make me snap. Are you scared that I'm going to attack you at some point? Because then I was just really freaked out. And then, so this wonderful social worker said, no, Rhonda, I believe in you. And so you see, from that experience, I really thought that everybody with any kind of mental health initials after their name secretly really thought, oh, bless her heart, look at her. She can dress herself. She can figure out how to get on an airplane all by herself. And that they secretly thought that I might ultimately
Be on a roof with a gun.
right?
Yeah.
She'll lose it one of these days, because I'm very passionate and I'm very loud. I mean, I could totally see where people would think that at some point in time that my head would just pop off my body and I would lose my mind and I would just be a mass murderer or something. And so then I heard about Dr. Lawrence Calhoun and how it was a thing. And he had done his whole lifetime of study about people who had been through really, really hard things and came out stronger on the other side and more resilient and more resourceful and more courageous and more empathetic and just stronger than the average person and all of those things. And I thought, oh my gosh, if there's research around it, then the people with all those initials will believe it. They don't have to take my word for it or your word for it. And all of that sums up why I felt so strongly about creating Successful Survivors Foundation, because those of us, and there's millions of us, it's estimated at approximately 36 million, but I think it's more than that, who were abused, mistreated in some way, when we were too little, too young to prevent it, but who have risen up and created good lives for ourselves. And we are good people, and we're not going to snap and go crazy. And of course, trauma can be a trigger for mental health issues, and it can be a trigger for a lot of stuff. And we can live our whole lives with a victim mentality, and it manifests in all these different ways. But the fact that we're all here right now talking about this and sharing how we deal with it, how we've gotten over it, and to whoever said it's not just one thing, yeah, things happen throughout our lives, but the things that we learned to survive what we've been through, those are tools in our tool chest, and we can pull those things back out and go, you know what? Like Lee, you said at one point in another podcast, we've survived all of our worst days. I think that was you, Lee. We can pull those tools out and we can get over it. When we're victimized, we have been victims. It's true. Nobody's denying that. And we're probably going to be victimized again at some point in time. Somebody's going to lie. Somebody's going to cheat. Somebody's going to not invite us to their birthday party. Whatever it is, it can be, minimal, or it can be severe. But we know it's in there, how to survive. If we can.
And Rhonda, what you were saying there, I hate it when people say, bless her heart. I just get that all the time. And I put that in my book. I'm like, don't bless my heart. God's blessed me lots and lots. Like, tell me what I'm capable of. I am worth more than getting your pity. I don't need your pity. Okay? That's pitiful.
Well, I think
and
that's. Oh, sorry.
Chris, go for it.
Well, I wanted to say, I think this is great. And when Rhonda gets on a tear, Rhonda gets on a tear. And there's a great quote by Kurt Cobain, I'm not like them, but I can pretend. And I think that speaks to what you were saying. And this first part, I think we've shown that you can identify the victim mentality rather easily. Mark Maron has a great quote. Someone asked him how he's doing. He says, well, I hate myself, but outside of that, everything's great. And I think this is a great place to take a break to end this first part. And I think when we come back, we should address, when you know you have a victim mentality, how do you pull yourself out of that victim mentality to do what you guys say? Because you're all motivational speakers. You're all motivational people, but not everyone is built that way. So for the average person, maybe the person who's not so motivated, like Mr. Non-Motivator here, don't reach for the stars. Just go for the top shelf. It's closer. But then you have a guy like that. How does he pull himself out of that? How he or she, how do they get themselves out of that victim mentality and move forward and be more productive in life? It seems like, and I'm going to have Amber speak on it in the next part, it seems like it's easily identifiable. So if it's easily identifiable, maybe it's not easy to overcome, but maybe there are paths that aren't so difficult. Maybe the obstacles aren't so high. I think we've had a great discussion on just how prevalent it is in society and how it affects so many people. And I'm excited to find out how you get over it because we're talking to 4 or 5 ladies. We were talking to some people who just don't put up with that kind of nonsense. And I'm excited to see and to find out how you all attack that sort of thing. So for the Successful Survivor podcast, come back because the next one's going to be some great tips on how to get over it. Thanks for joining us.